Meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me, as almost always, it's been a couple weeks now, but Alan Medlock, Medlock1 on Twitter. We're back at it after a run of Cardinal baseball that's, frankly, Alan, just a little bit surprising. 3 game winning streaks. The first time they've done that since, I think, early June. What are your feelings about this team right now?
Still not overly excited about any potential playoff run. Not sure if they have that in them right now, but it is fun to see them kind of get off the mat and play well. At least make things a little bit interesting in the stretch run from where you have those lackadaisical losses that just kind of a gut punch. Here's the thing: their last 3 losses have all been by 1 run. Get out of Cincinnati. That's their last 3 losses. We made the comments, or I did anyway, that you're playing with fire by those games. You're going to be galvanized and play extremely well, or the luck's going to flip on you and you're going to lose some of those games. And that's 2 to LA, 1 to Milwaukee, and those are both going to be playoff teams. I don't know. That says a lot about their inconsistent offense to me. But yeah, it's at least made it fun to watch here at the end, because leaving Cincinnati, you're thinking, well, are we shifting our attention to football here because this is getting ready to be ugly again and run into the same situation that they did last year?
Yeah, they played better against the Dodgers, but you lost 2 of 3.
Yep.
and kept falling back. And after they lost the first game to Milwaukee, which, like you and I were saying earlier, they easily could have won. They had the opportunity there, bases loaded, 1 out in the 9th inning to win that game. And when they didn't, when it felt like, again, more of the same, pushing you, what was it? I guess it was 12 games back in the division then. And I think it put them into 3rd place. The Reds were right there for, it could have easily been on their way to last. They were not that far ahead of Pittsburgh. That really did feel like, here, this is it. Now, a 3-game winning streak is nice. It brings them back to 500, which is an accomplishment. That the way they had been trending since probably the All-Star break. It felt like once they've kind of like those underdogs in the basketball games, as soon as they lose the lead, it's over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It slides and it wind up losing by 20 or something like that. That's kind of what it felt like with 500. Once they fell under that, especially by a couple games, it just felt like it was, okay, this is over. For them to rally back, and they've got Sonny Gray going today. There's a reasonable chance for another win there. For them to rally back to maybe even above 500 is something of an accomplishment. Again, that's not. I don't know what it says about this organization that we're somewhat excited about 500. But in the picture of what this team is doing now, that's an improvement.
No, yes, you hit the nail on the head of something that I feel like we'll probably talk about extensively on this one after we get done with the current run, is the state of where they are. Yes, let's make the most out of 24. Let's push for this. Let's enjoy the young guys playing. Let's start figuring out where we're going. I think you can look at a positive of Palante maybe moving the needle a little bit on rotation next year. There's a lot of positives to take away. Let's not forget that they're very middling right now, and that's the situation to where I think that and you made a comment. I thought you had a good piece on this, and I think that we're like minded in a lot of sense, and I think most fans are. That we're at a breaking point, so to speak, on a lot of the traditional ways we've looked at things over the last 20 years or so. I think that front office is going to look a little bit different. Whether that means the if the ownership is going to let them spend a little bit of money, that's yet to be seen. But I do think we're in an era in the next year or so, starting with this offseason, where things are going to move a little bit. So
Mhm.
I think that even with a strong finish right here, I still think that we're in a phase to where things are going to be changing a little bit, just because they're stuck in the middle. And you've seen what
Mhm.
Milwaukee does by running away with the division by losing their number one arm and basically their best offensive player for an extended period of
Yeah.
time this year. And I think that you're trailing behind. And I know this is going to be a bigger picture question, but I'm going to try to do my best to enjoy the rest of the season and hope that the young guys move the needle uh, enough to build up excitement for next year.
And I get what you're saying for sure, but it's also interesting to note that some of these new guys are down, or young guys are down in Memphis. This is a week where we
Oh,
saw Jordan Walker
listen. I
return.
completely agree with you, and I think that's part of the issue.
Mhm. Yeah, Jordan Walker down back to Memphis after a week that really didn't make any sense. I mean, I kind of understand what they're talking about, but it just the usage and the way what they went about it, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then Nolan Gorman sent down, and you've got Ivan Herrera who's been down there for months now, right? I mean, somebody pointed out that the 2, 3, 4 for Memphis was those three guys, and you would not have expected that at any point in time this year, but much less in September. You would have thought that would have been, I think ideally you would have almost expected that to be a 2, 3, 4 in St. Louis, right? Um, maybe not quite, but close. It's very interesting to see what the organization is thinking and doing on some of these guys. But let's talk a little bit about Nolan Gorman. I think that I think the demotion was a surprise just because what they didn't think they would ever do it, and maybe that does send a message that they're in panic mode. Not panic mode, but hey, we're going to do anything we can to get back in this thing.
Yeah, I mean more knee jerk than we've seen in the past. And I echo all your sentiments on the Walker move, because I want to it just puts you on the radar for so much negative attention. It's one of those.
Mhm.
I understand the argument that, hey, we needed a bat and we wanted to get the best one, the hottest one at the time, but you also wasted a option on him, which probably tells you that he'll be the big league roster all year next year, regardless. But you can't tell me
Mhm.
that Baker wouldn't have been a better fit in that situation. Not because he's a better hitter, but just because he may be a more movable asset. You kind of got to figure out what's going on. So
Right.
it didn't make a lot of sense, and I thought that brought a lot of negative attention on him. The Gorman deal, it's funny. I was going to bring this up, and I know this is stupid because it's just one at bat, but you're right. You had the one out, bases loaded, and you go strikeout, strikeout. One of the guys that's in the one of the guys that was in that at bat, being Goldschmidt, his contract's up, and they're going to probably try to renegotiate something on it cheaper. Another one that was in that bat is Gorman, who's not even in St. Louis anymore. That says a lot about the team at this point. You know what I mean? To lose an opener like that, and let's not even get into an opener in front of not many fans. It's you can tell that right now there's a little bit of scramble. That also one of those arguments that makes me think that we're in for some fairly substantial changes in the front office type look. But hey, they're at least moving some things around to try to improve. I mean, I don't know if I get the Crawford release, and maybe the timing even makes sense. But I mean, you can see the writing on the wall on that one when he signed it, and whatever, late March.
Yeah. 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 I mean, we did not expect Crawford to last out the year. Um, that being said, we also expected Tommy Edman to come back.
That's
So I
true.
mean, that's part of why. And I think to me it was a little bit surprising. I get again, I understand it. It's just a little bit surprising to see this organization cut a guy like that this late in the game, right? I mean, like, here it is almost, you only got like 6 weeks left and you're cutting him. And maybe he was fine with that. Maybe it was just the fact that he wasn't playing and, he did what he was going to do. His kids got to see him a little bit more and
Yeah,
he was fine with it. Maybe. I mean, you don't hear anything about him trying to get another job. Um, I would have thought that, you know, and nobody's going to, right? I mean, unless San Francisco hires him just to let him retire with them. Um, but you know, there's an argument, right, that you could do the same thing with Matt Carpenter, but they're not going to do that because he's a Cardinal. Um, so I don't know. It's just a little bit surprising that they went that direction, but I guess it does seem to me an indication that they're going to try anything, and maybe that's part of the problem. I mean, it feels a little less of the planning and thought out stuff and more of a let's see if this works and oh it didn't, let's move on um type of moves, especially with the Walker being up for a week or whatever. That being said, Luke and Baker has definitely taken advantage of his time in St. Louis, right? Home run first, he pinch hits home run his first time up. He walked 3 times last night. It feels like they're going to get him out there into games, when the platoon advantage works for him. And I think it'll be interesting to see what he does and how things go for him because I don't think he's part of the Cardinals next year, but this gives an opportunity for him to, show that he can play at the major
sure.
league level. And I mean, I guess you can't rule it out that he's going to be with the Cardinals next year, but um, I don't know. I think that it's at least a showcase. I mean, this is something that he needs to grab a hold of because this probably is his last chance.
Sure. No, I agree. And I was glad to see it. And I mean, he was just putting up crazy numbers that he probably should have came up a little bit sooner, especially the fact that they can't hit lefties. It
Yeah.
doesn't make a lot of sense. But like I said, this is one of those fly on the wall conversations we'd love to be a part of to know exactly what they're thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there were underlying numbers that were a little bit hesitant. I mean, Baker really was boom or bust, and you don't know how that translate. I mean, we kind of Gorman was a little bit of that, right? And he just went back to Memphis. So there was some concern, and there probably still is. I mean, he's only had 3 games, so you can't draw a whole lot of conclusions from it. But it's nice to know that he got off on the right foot, and will hopefully continue.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Um. So Cardinals 10 games back in the division, 5 games back in the wild card. Like we said, it's nice to have a run, but it's real hard still to see this run panning out, right? Because they've got to. What do you think? They've probably got to win, you know, 88 games, right, to get in the division into the wild card.
Yeah. I mean, you got to
Um,
play it like a 650 clip or something like that. I mean, I was
Something
trying
like
to do
that.
the
I
math
haven't I haven't
earlier
done
this week.
yeah. Um, I mean, it's a tough thing. I don't know what I want. I mean, because some of this is, hey, they start winning, you get a little bit of hope in there, but then you still realize how far it is to go, and it's a tough balancing act, I guess, this time of year.
Yeah. I mean, with me right now. Yes, you want to go out. You want to see him play well every night. You want to see mistake free ball. That's kind of what I want to see every time. I really enjoy watching Wynn and Burleson, which makes me excited about the future just because I really like those two. I really like the dynamic at the top of the lineup. I know that people argue that it's maybe not their best fit. I don't care. It's one of those where I kind of like watching both of them play. Contreras has been great. It's one
Mhm.
of those deals to where now to me, I'll be honest with you. I think that the contracts alone make them easy to pick on, but yeah, this is totally different if your stars are stars. It's just
Sure.
the way that I look
Yeah.
at it. A Goldschmidt can't OPS 600. And that's
Mhm.
the front office is going to get beat up. Marmal's going to get beat up. All these things happen. Goldschmidt hits 7th for you. And it's just one of those things to where that what can you do to overcome the fact that you expected those two to not be necessarily career norms, but somewhere in that area to pick you up. Contreras is doing his part. The young guys are doing their part, and it's ebbs and flows, and that's to be expected early in their career. But you're not going to be very good when your stars aren't stars, and that's what they're here to do. Yeah, and there's a lot of frustration that comes out of it. Something really got to me the other night. By the way, whenever Arenado hit that grand slam, you could physically tell the season that he's gone through, because going around the bases, he was fighting emotion, and after the game, he was really struggling not to show it in the interview with Hayes in the post game, and it meant a lot to me because there were times where I thought, "Wow, where was the effort on that?" Well, I think the fact that he's wearing this is evident now. I'm sure Goldschmidt is too, but it's one of those situations to where, as a team, if your tentpole guys in the lineup aren't hitting, man, the other guys can only do so much at this point, and it's tough. So the way that I look at it is, let's see what where that's going to change, and see what Wynn and Burleson can do, and see if they can go sign Kyle Tucker. You know, one of those.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, you're right. This is a situation that, when you went into this year, yeah, you didn't expect 2022
No,
of
agreed.
these
I mean,
guys, but you thought they'd be at least, maybe a step down. I mean, they were obviously slowing down. I think Goldie more than Nolan. You expected it, but you expected quality, and it hasn't been there. Now, Nolan is hitting better over the last. He's continued
his second half's been
continued
a
to hit
lot
better.
better.
Yeah. And more so even just August. I was
Yeah.
looking, the splits on the first half are not as extreme as you might think, but I think part of that is because he was hitting, started to improve in June, and so it's counting the first half stats, but the OPS for the first half is 704, the second half is 794, and he had 8 home runs in the first half, 6 in the second. But like I said, I think a lot of that is, counting in some June, because but August he's hitting 308. He's got the 3 home runs. He's got more RBIs already in August than he has in any other month. RBI, sorry. But so yeah, I think for in one, I mean, I'm biased. I love Nolan Arenado, but I think it also helps to see this and know that he's not really washed up, right? I mean, there's still value there. He's not necessarily going to be the guy that was third in the MVP, but
Sure.
I think he can still be a contributor. And maybe you go into next season expecting him to be a contributor instead of a tentpole. I don't know. Maybe that very may be possible, but I think he's still going to bring value to this team. Paul Goldschmidt, I really am very interested to see what he wants to do when it comes to the end of the year. Because I don't know that is Paul Goldschmidt the guy that is too proud to go out there when he can't do it anymore? Or is Paul Goldschmidt the guy that's too proud to leave with a season like this? And I don't know. I know he has talked about he didn't want to play into his 40s, so he's going to play like only 1 or 2 more years anyway. I mean, depending on how he's really felt about this season, it feels like he could retire, and maybe that would solve the problem for the Cardinals, because the Cardinals are probably going to have this, balancing act of, if you can bring Paul Goldschmidt back on a $6 or $7 million contract, do you do it? And I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Sure. No, I agree. I mean, here's the one thing that I just don't think they can do. I don't think that you can bring them back and expect a bounce back year. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I know that's where you were going with it as well. I feel like that's one of those to where you're going to have to, you figured out now that you're going to have to find a bat one way or the other. You know what I mean? And it's where that bat's going to come from is going to be interesting, especially if they go and sign him. Because if you do get that, here's my thing. I'm one of the situations where I think you will not see him in a uniform outside of St. Louis. I'm pretty convinced of that now. Now, whether you see him in a uniform or not, that's a good question. gut feeling, I bet he comes back cheap, because I think if credible reports came up, if those reports were credible, I feel like that's probably going to happen at some point. But the thing is, where are you going to improve if you bring them both back? Because you can't hope those two live up to, the 2022 versions. You can't hope that Gorman and Walker bounce back. And, that right there gets you into a little bit of trouble. So their offseason could be interesting. And we always say that, but I think that they're at a point now where they are going to have to go get a bat of some substance. Bregman's an odd fit. There's, and that's the two that the two that come to mind to me the most are the Bregman and Tucker deal, because they didn't get extended. I would love Tucker. I think that's you get peak Cody Bellinger with Kyle Tucker, but I just don't know if that's the route that they're going to go. But there's a lot of in-house replacements for a first baseman, and that's going to be something to watch. I feel like, because I think that you could go Burleson at first base and be pretty darn good, and not really lose as much defensively as you think you do, in a really good infield.
I mean, maybe I know that what Burleson played first on Wednesday, and there was an error that was made by Nolan that most of the people that were commenting, including the media, were saying that's probably it can go on Nolan, but it was really a first baseman could have corralled that. And so, but he hasn't played there much. I mean, those are kind of things that are going to happen, and he's not going to be Gold Glove, but he could be well enough. And I think that's, I mean, that's the
But
balancing act.
just curiosity, what makes you say that?
What do you mean?
That he's not Gold Glove caliber?
I mean, just because I don't think he's played there that much. I mean, could he be?
Keep in mind,
Maybe,
he
but
was
I
a
feel like
two-way guy. He's much more athletic than people think.
true. That's true. And I mean, he has improved in the outfield, I think.
Yeah,
Although it's still to the point where they don't necessarily want him. I mean, he's out there almost the time, but they have to.
sure.
I still think the defense is an issue. Again, I guess the default for most players is they're not Gold Glove guys, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's true. Yeah.
I mean that is the top level. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he could work at it, and I know he's a guy that will put in some work. But as Moneyball told us, it's incredibly hard. So, I think that's a possibility, though. I mean, Jordan Walker's a possibility. Moving Nolan Gorman over there is a possibility. Um, I the idea of going out and getting another bat, I absolutely understand that, and then you're right. But then I start thinking about, is this a situation where you go out and get another bat, and then you're losing a lot of 10-7 games, because they're going to have to do something with the pitching staff. Because I think the idea of running a staff back of, I mean, you have Gray and Fetty, but then, is Matz in that? I don't know. You're going to have Michaelis. Are you going to get, if you're not bringing back Leonard Gibson, you have to replace that spot as well. And there's nobody. I mean, Quentin Matthews is looking good, and maybe he'll have an outside shot at spring training. But there's not a whole lot of people that are coming up that are going to make an impact. So you're going to have to go out and get a pitcher there too. And I just don't expect a whole lot of, you're not going over the salary cap, I guess, or the luxury tax threshold. So I don't know. I mean, that is an interesting thing for them to try to figure out what do they need more, because their resources financially, I think, are going to be limited.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger issue of all of this, about no matter who's going to be pulling the strings. It's as far as baseball ops side of it, if they can't spend and go and get things and trust the money that they're spending, it's going to be next year's going to look a lot like this year, unless Burleson becomes a Kyle Tucker, or what I mean, vice versa. And I'm not saying they can't. I mean, I think those two have shown enough this year to where, we being Wynn and Burleson, that I think that things are exciting on that front, and that's where Donovan started slow. He's coming on board too. I mean, I feel like those guys are going to even have to take that next step up. And then is this kind of a smart alecky thing to say, of course, after he played pretty well last night, but Nootbaar is going to have to become something. That's another issue that they have. And there's going to be holes to fill, definitely. But if they're not willing to spend a little bit to do it, and I'm at the point now where I'm like, you're going to slide in a division because you have a lot of youth coming behind you, and I know they're not going to be reactionary on it, but you could you could kind of change the face of the franchise a little bit if you can go out and get one big bat and then bolster the rotation, because there's going to be arms out there. I'm not so certain that Lynn even pitches again, period, next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, you're going to probably have to get another. I would be willing to bet that their pitching side works very similar to what it did this offseason. But what worries me is that may be their only move, and they just may bank on bounce backs in the lineup, and that I think that will be dangerous.
I think, this is going to be a season where the front office valuation is just going to be critical on these players,
Yep.
right? And I think that's going to be, and maybe that leads us into the other part, who's going to be doing these evaluations, right? It would be smart of them, I think, to have the current group do the evaluations, but also have Heim Bloom or somebody like that, somebody that's not as invested in these players, to evaluate them as well and see what the differences are. Because I mean, there's obviously very good value in Nolan Gorman. But the streakiness is hard,
Yes.
right? And so if you're the player, the organization and the regime, if you will, that drafted him, and you see the power and you've seen him be good, and you like, hey, I know it's in there and all this, but then if you're coming from the outside, it's like, look, maybe it's not there, maybe it's not consistent enough,
Yeah.
maybe we need to move on.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's funny. I've kind of felt like that even after he had the big year last year. Like, gosh, you can get a lot for somebody like that. And, that's a lot of power. He's learned a new position. He could probably play third, his natural position in the long term. I don't know. I was kind of on that front to maybe move him. You know what I mean? In past shows, I talked about that just because, not that I don't have faith in it, but I feel like that's one of those that we will deal with this a lot. Of just his game feels like that. I will say something that's come to light to me, and I may be wrong on this. Athletic teams eat them up. You notice that? They never throw anybody out.
It's been rough. I know Contreras got a couple this week, but
I feel like he's
it's
kind of
been rough.
stepping up on it, and I think the staff is kind of working on it a little bit more too. Because I'm telling you, to see what Milwaukee is, to see what Kansas City did to them, it's crazy to see how that dynamic is shifting in baseball, to where these athletic teams are really taking advantage of situations. And that's what I kind of wish. I wish St. Louis would get more athletic. I mean, that to me pushes the Walker deal. It makes it even more heartbreaking because he can do all those things. And to see that he just can't get his traction here just kind of stinks, because I feel like you go with a Walker in the outfield and you really get athletic. Not just because I'm too lazy to search it, but where are they on the stolen base rankings? Because it feels like they never move at all.
Yeah, I think they were, last I looked. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But last I knew, they were pretty low. Now Victor Scott got a stolen base. They had like what, 3? Was it Wednesday?
Yep,
and it really kind of made it feel like, like they were finally pulling out some of these tools because they were just so desperate on things. Let's see. That's my computer. Okay. Wow. So this is gonna be fun. The Washington Nationals have 176, and the Reds have 174. The Brewers have 161. I'm just gonna pull and then the Cubs are down at 110, and then the Pirates have 81, and the Cardinals have 71. They're 22nd in baseball.
Yeah. Honestly, I thought it would be lower, if you want to know the truth. I mean, but also we have them under the microscope. I don't see his others as much.
Yeah.
So
I said they're one behind the Athletics, but they're only 2 ahead of the Rangers, and there's about 6 ahead of the Rockies. So it's very possible that that game recently just pushed them from 23 to 22.
Yeah.
But and they could move up. Now they're Houston's at 78, so they're probably not. They're going to sit in that 21 to 23 range probably for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I wish that would change a little bit. That I feel like the athletic teams have given them trouble, and we had talked about that a ton, to where they just don't move much. How many did you say Cincinnati had?
They have 174. They have more
60 of
than
those
double
a De La
what the
Cruz.
Cardinals does. Right. I mean, there's a lot there.
You're looking.
And
I'm like,
also,
hold on. Wow.
who's running on the Nationals? I mean, because it's 176. That surprised me as well. And then the Brewers, like I said, Brewers 161, which is another reason why the Brewers are
without a
winning
doubt.
is, because you're right. We go into the season saying, well, they don't really have the pitching, and the offense hasn't been that great in a long time, but they're making it happen. So, those numbers are significantly higher when you're used to the Cardinals now running, and it's
hey,
and
I
it
will
is
say
weird, right?
this: in the league lead right now, Washington has 3 of the top 15 guys.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I was like, well, it must be nice.
And I mean, of course, Washington's struggling as well, but they give them a chance, see what they can do, and that
Exactly.
kind of thing. And baseball has made these changes that are supposed to make running more, more to the point, right, or more aggressive. Oh, and I was looking. You said that about the Nationals. Lane Thomas is 10th right now, and of course
Exactly.
he's not a National now.
He
But
was one of
a
the
lot
ones
of
I
those
counted
came
in,
from.
as a matter of fact.
Okay, yeah. So, but we kind of. I'm just a little bit. I'm always surprised that Mason Wynn hasn't stolen as many. Obviously Victor Scott hasn't been on as much, and he hasn't been up as much. And he's got 4, which is, okay, for given those limitations, it's probably not too surprising. But there's still times, like I remember reading Twitter. I guess it was Wednesday's game, and and the media folks were like, kept waiting for Victor Scott to steal. It's like, why is it taking so long? He finally did, like late in the at bat or something of that nature. And I don't know. I mean, if they're just too concerned about losing a runner on the base pass, but my goodness, you've got to you got to take advantage of these things when you've got guys like that.
Agreed. Yeah, they're extremely station to station, and that's tough, especially I don't know. The frustrations come about pretty easy.
Well, and I know, you're talking about station to station. It was this week, and of course, I'm not watching. I'm watching it on game day or whatever the case may be. Victor Scott's on, and then Mason Wynn gets a hit, but Victor Scott wasn't able to go. He only goes to second, and then there's a base hit, and I'm like, these guys. And then the bases are loaded, and I'm like, how did Victor Scott not score? Now it turned out it was like some sort of like deflected ball in the infield, or like a ground ball that beat out, or whatever the case may be. But I'm like, it should not take you 4 hits to score Victor Scott. I mean, and Mason Wynn, with Mason Wynn part of that, it should not take you this many hits. And I know some of it is the situation that was there, but again, if you're not willing to, and maybe they will be, maybe we'll see that a little bit more. Like I said, Wednesday's game, they were pretty aggressive on the base paths. Hope maybe we'll see that a little bit more as we go down the stretch, because they've got to do something. They have to. We talked about it a minute ago. If they're going to get to 88 wins, and that still feels reasonable, right? Then maybe it doesn't take that many, but you're probably in that ballpark. 88 wins means they have to go 24-10 the rest of the way. And given their schedule, and given how they do that, I mean, we saw 2011. We know it can happen, but man, I wouldn't want to put any kind of money on it.
No, I mean, 10 losses, say starting today on the 24th. Mm-hmm. One of those trips is through New York. I will tell you, their season may determine on how well they do against San Diego next week. Mm-hmm. Because that's the team that you could jump, essentially. Yep. And,
Well, yeah, although they've got the top wild card, so I mean, you still need to win them, because you need to win the game.
Yeah, you know what? You're right about that. I forget how hot they are.
Yeah, I mean they've
It's been
been
crazy.
yeah,
They pretty much got
yeah,
rookie of the year locked away. They may get manager of the year locked away, and
I
yeah,
think
I
that
mean
I mean
it's crazy.
Skeens is gonna have something to say about that rookie of the year probably.
I don't know. Merrill's
I
good.
mean,
I'm telling you,
yeah,
he
I'm
is.
not. I mean,
That's yeah. It well, and another thing too. I wonder how much longer Skeen's going to pitch.
yeah, I mean that will be an issue too. That may hurt him if that's. I guess the Padres have the second spot.
Yeah.
They're half game behind the Diamondbacks and 3
Well,
up on the
those
Braves.
two
So,
both have been smoking hot though. It's crazy.
mhm,
But speaking of which, see this is what worries me about things moving forward. I think that we're probably seeing a bad era of Cardinals baseball right now. You know what I mean? Because
mhm,
they're stuck in the middle. And like I said, they're not going to be reactionary. You know how they are. But man, when you look at what Pittsburgh has coming back as a rotation, what you see that
yeah,
Cincinnati you kind of look and think, man, Cincinnati should probably be a lot better, and that's pretty dangerous. The fact that
mhm,
that they could be a lot better next year. Milwaukee's probably due for a dip at some point, but I kind of thought that may happen this year, and they didn't.
right,
And then you run through, and if Chicago is ever Chicago, which I don't know if they're ever going to be, you're going to have to do something because you're going to get
mhm,
lost in the shuffling division really easy. And if everybody else plays to potential, you could be the last place team very quickly. And I know that I know that you had kind of written about that, this week. It's still, I
yeah.
mean, it's kind of a tedious time.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote at the Substack about the fact that we do seem to be at the end of an era, and the end of eras in the past have lasted a while. And it did feel a little bit, again, from reports, we weren't there, about the 50s and the 70s and those times between good Cardinals teams that are kind of apathetic, and that even goes toward attendance, right? I
Oh,
mean, because
that's
from what I understand, in the '70s, that the old stadium was, it wasn't 40,000 on watching bad teams. It was pretty sparse, right? And then, and that's what we're starting to see again this week. This week they set like 3 straight lows for the stadium. I
yeah,
mean, non-pandemic version. I think Monday night, Tuesday night, and then Wednesday afternoon both did. In the last two dropped under
and that's
30,000,
paid.
and that's paid,
Yeah,
right? Like Jeff Jones said, there's probably about half that actually there. And to be fair, there comp people are there that don't get counted in that number, but that's still not enough. Um, so yeah, and I think if anything, that's what's going to get
hmm
the attention and make for changes. Now, a lot of people yelled at Bill DeWitt III when he had his interview earlier in the year about his comment about, you know, like people like something about, I don't exactly remember it, but it's basically to the point that people think they have to not go to the ballpark to send us a message. And I think some people thought that he was saying that people should just go whatever because they're going to cut if they don't. And I think there may have been some to that as well. But I also got out of that it they knew, right, they know that it's bad, even without people not going.
yeah,
But I think that when they see less than 30,000 people, and I haven't looked at the numbers, but I imagine, I did look, they were like 6th, maybe I think they were 6th in average attendance, which is really low for them, right? They're usually in the top 2 or 3. Um, and I don't know if they'll hit 3,000,000
yeah.
this year. And that's pretty much their standard baseline. I think it's even gotten to where it was 3.2 when they're figuring out budgets and stuff like that. And that is going to make an impact on what they do this winter, that um and the TV deal. But somebody needs to tell them, argue them into the fact that if you then, cut salary because of this, you're going to wind up with a, self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree. You're going to have a spiral that, you're not going to be able to put enough good of a product, so less people are going to come, so you're going to have less money, so you're going to be able to, all that kind of stuff. And until you can develop young players, which is still a ways off, you're going to have to invest that money into this team, or if nothing else, spend your money more wisely than giving Miles Michaelis a 4-year extension and signing Steven Matz to a 4-year deal. I mean, I think there's that too, right? I mean, they've spent money, they just haven't necessarily spent it well.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
So, we'll have to see what lessons they take this, because we thought they would take lessons out of last year, right? Dead last, worst team since 1990. A lot of apathetic fans, and they took lessons from it. This idea that they needed pitching, which we all agreed with, but then they didn't necessarily apply them the way we thought they would.
Yeah,
Sonny Gray was nice, but then getting Lynn and Gibson, and then it was frustrating to hear at the trade deadline when they go trade for Fetty that, hey, they were really interested in Fetty at that, but, once they signed Lynn and Gibson, they just didn't have a spot for him. I was like, "Well, why did you sign Lynn and Gibson at the same time?" I
yeah,
mean, that just, you're kind of like, "Oh, well, we would have, but, we did," well, you did that. You did that other option. You took yourself out of getting a Fetty. Sign one of those guys. Don't sign both of them. I mean, and I don't think anything this year has
yeah,
vindicated their idea of signing both guys. Gibson's been good, and then he's kind of struggled as of late. Lynn has had his moments, but he's also had
yeah.
injuries, and he's also had some really rough games. Um, I just I don't think I have, and especially with Lynn early on wasn't going deep, and then he's been hurt. The idea he was going to take up innings has not been there. Um, I just don't think they're gonna get the validation on this idea of, "Let's get 2 guys that are basically the same to fill out the rotation." And I think that they've gotta do something different
No,
this year.
agreed, agreed. And it's I don't know if how much we could blame the pitching on anything that's going on necessarily. I mean, and if you do, feel like you can put that toward Gray more than anything, not
Mhm.
being the lockdown guy. But you know, not to keep harping on this, but if your offense isn't your offense, you can only do so much. You know what I mean? The pitching's
True.
been good. Pitching's been good. I mean, it achieved what they wanted to achieve. You just can't score any runs, and that's I understand. I mean, you're gonna have to improve that rotation somehow. You know what I mean? And you're right. I mean, I bet the pitching will probably be number one to improve in the offseason, and that scares me a little bit on the offense. But I'm not sure what they can do the off season anyway on the offensive side of it. But you're right. Just you do like Bernie Lucas had a great point. Is it time? We need to trust somebody else to spend the money at this point. And that
Mhm.
makes me think more than anything. Just like even your piece, you were just like, uh, there needs to be something done.
Yeah, yeah. I just to use 2 basic measurements, the Cardinals are right now 18th in OPS. They're 18th in
Yeah,
ERA. So I think, the blame goes both ways,
sure,
right? I mean, it's just everything has, again, they're 18th in ERA. They have a 4.11 team ERA, which if you've got enough of that, if you've got the offense that you thought you had, you're at least winning more
sure,
games, right? Because
yeah,
if you said walking into this season that the team is going to have a 4.11 team ERA at the end of August, I think you take that, right? You're thinking, oh, okay, good. They're probably at least, within a game or so of the division. They're probably in the wild card, because that's exactly what you're expecting out of, with a Gibson and a Lynn and a Michael, with a one and a bunch of fours as we thought we had
yeah,
going in,
yeah.
you
No,
know.
no, agreed. I
Um,
mean, and I think they knew what they were getting into with the rotation. And it was one of those where,
mhm,
hey, we don't want there to be a mystery who's starting every third day, which they had last year. And
right,
I think that was it was more of the stabilizing of, hey, take the ball and we'll figure it out from there. We have confidence that you will keep us in ball games. With that hope that they could slug and be a little more athletic, which just hadn't happened.
right.
Think
Yeah,
about this
I
though.
yeah, I
Not
agree.
to cut you off. Think
Yeah.
about this. Where
No,
would
go
they
ahead.
be with that win of Burleson's hot streak?
Yeah.
But would
They'd
they be
be
at their
yeah.
expected win loss? I mean, it could possibly be.
Their expected win-loss right now is yeah, it's still 10 under. They've cut some games off that runs off that differential, but it's still they're 10 games under. I I hate to put 10 games on those two guys, but they'd be a lot closer.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
doubt. Especially without, without both of them. And I think that's that and what Contreras has
yes.
done when he's been
I think
healthy.
that gets overlooked a bunch. What Contreras has
Yeah,
done.
yeah. So those are when you're getting down here in another month and you start looking at team MVPs, those are the guys that are going to be in that mix.
The
Um,
yeah the yeah that
that and Ryan Helsley.
yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. And you know what? You forget about Helsley so much because they don't have to use him. You know what I mean? I mean, he didn't pitch for like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
week.
yeah, and that is probably and he has scuffled a little bit in the second half. That game against the Cubs that he let get away has kind of haunted them. I think we talked about it on one of the shows where that kind of led to what really bad
Yeah,
8 of 10 or
yeah,
something stretch that they had. So, but there is no doubt. I mean, what he's got 36 saves. I mean, right there, you take half of those because last year they were blowing games like that. So they were,
oh
so
yeah,
that's without, even just 10 of those games, right? They're right back down. They're right there where they're, that expected run thing is if he's not locking those games down, or if he's not available. So his health has been a key and effectiveness has been a key part of this, of what they have done this year. So yeah, I think, I don't think you can put any pitcher above what Helsley has done. I mean, when Sonny Gray was going well, you probably could just because of the innings and all that. But Sonny Gray struggled quite a bit, and I think it's Helsley's your team Cy Young
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I would think so. Fairly easy.
Yeah.
Um, what? Gosh, we can go off season like crazy. So if we need to, if you need to redirect to something, we can do it.
We still got 15 minutes. Go on.
No, I just what does this rotation look like next year? Is Palante locked in? It almost has to be.
I feel like, for numerous
Yeah.
reasons, one, salary, two, effectiveness. And he's done it long enough, right? He had some effectiveness last year, and they've put him in, and he's been good this year. I don't see this as I mean, he may not be this good, but he's going to be good
Uh huh.
enough. I mean, if he's your fourth or fifth starter next year, you're doing well. The fact that there's a chance that he could be like your second star or third starter. I mean, second actually, honestly, because I'm wondering what we'll see out of Eric Fetty next year. I mean, I know what we've seen, especially, if you use Miles Michael as an example, and not obviously it's not everybody's like this, but we've had a little bit of others that did this. He had a really great first year after coming over from Japan. And then the second year wasn't so
Yeah.
great. And I do wonder if, again, Fetty's at 7.5. So even if he's your fourth starter, that's fine. Um, financially. But I do wonder if there's going to be a little bit of, you know, adjustment to him
Yeah. That's true.
and we've seen a little bit of that, right? With he's not been quite as dominant since the trade as he was with the White Sox. He's still been fine for the most part. Um, but yeah, I think that he's there's a non-zero chance that if this rotation comes back without adding anybody, that Palante winds up being your second starter next
Yeah.
year, and I don't think that's great.
No, yeah. I mean, because when you look at it, you go, and I in no particular order: Gray, Fetty, Michaelis, um, and then it's kind of up in the air, right? At this point. And you and I
Yeah.
both thought that Gibson was a lock to come back. I'm not so certain that is, but that would be an angle they would go because that would be some cost certainty that they know they had. The knowing that those things are open and knowing that they need to improve, I want to just throw a question to you. I have not looked at a
Mm.
single salary matrix. We do know what Michaelis is. That's why they signed him. Who is more
Right.
likely to be traded in the offseason? Miles Michaelis or Matthew Liberatore?
Well, I think you would have to say more likely to be traded would be Matthew Liberatore because I don't think anybody would take Miles Michaelis. Um, while I can see a team taking Matthew
Sure.
Liberatore. I don't think the Cardinals are going to. I mean, if the Cardinals had their choice, they'd trade Michaelis. Although I'm not 100% sure they'd trade either one of them. But Liberatore's done enough of the bullpen. I don't. He's an interesting guy, right? I mean, we've gotten burned by so many hitters going somewhere else and being effective, but I have a problem believing that somebody would trade for him, turn him into a starter, and he'd be the guy that we thought he was going to be.
Yeah.
I just don't know that's going to happen.
No, I agree with that. Gosh, there's some bullpen. There's the one start where he took it out of nowhere and pitched extremely well was awesome. But then there's been some multiple
Right.
bullpen innings where you're just like, man, what a weapon. And then there's been some also other starts where you're like, holy cow, he's not very good. One of those type deals. Yeah, that's that mystery because I'm like, gosh, it's nice to get that multi-inning guy of the pen, but I don't think that's what anybody envisioned.
No, but it is what it
Yeah,
is, right? I
true.
mean, you're well beyond the cost that you paid for him, right? Randy Arozarena isn't even in Tampa Bay anymore, and Jose Martinez has been retired forever. Um, that's gone. And so if you get anything out of him, and if it's we have seen, and not to necessarily he's going to be an Andrew Miller type, but that kind of idea, that's the kind of a guy that on a good team, when you get into a playoffs, can be huge, right? I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Matthew Liberatore could be the reason the Cardinals win playoff series or even the World Series, because of what he could do coming in the third inning and be effective through the fifth or sixth. I mean, it's possible. Um, so I think there's a place for him on the roster next year, which is more than I would have said necessarily at the beginning of this year. Michaelis, yeah, I just don't see. I mean, if you're going to pay all of his salary to let somebody else have him, I don't think there's a whole lot of value in that.
Yeah.
I think that he's also the institutional leader. With Wainwright gone, he's the longest serving guy, right? Especially in the rotation or in the bullpen, even or in a pitching staff, I guess is what I was trying to say. So I don't think that they have. I think they'll value that, even if they're not valuing what he did on the field. That's a drawback necessarily could be. I mean, because if he's struggling on the field, but I think they're bringing him back. And I don't have a huge problem. I mean, we saw what Wednesday. There was a game where I was 100% sure going into Wednesday's game. We had the grand slam by Nolan the night before, and it's like they're going to come out, they're going to be flat. Michael's just going to give up 5 or 6
Yeah.
runs, and everything's going to just fade away. And he came out and pitched, gave a couple hits in the first inning, and then didn't do it. I don't think he gave up any more. I mean, he has games where he can still be that number 2 starter that we've seen him be, and they're just not as many of them. So there's still value, I think, to Miles Michaelis. It's just, what are you putting around him? Again, you should not go into the season thinking he's going to be your number 2. And I guess next year with Fetty here, though, he'd be your number 3, and that's a little bit better. But still, I mean, you'd probably rather have your Michaelis be ideally, I think you'd have him be a 5, right? But I don't know that the Cardinals can do that. And I think what's going to be really interesting also is what they do with Steven Matz.
Yeah, that's
You know,
yes.
he went. I think he went 85 or something pitches last time out. And he's going to pitch one more rehab game, but they're obviously bringing him back with a starter's workload, so they're probably bringing him back as a starter this year. Is this a trial run? And if it goes well, he's in the rotation next year, and if he doesn't, he's in the bullpen. I don't know. I think that's. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah, that has been such a weird signing. I mean, I understand that some of it was ineffectiveness and some of it was injury, but where I was like, I kind of like the signing, bringing in a lefty that can take the ball, and that's just hadn't been the case.
Yeah, No, and it's very funny to look back at the fact that Steve Cohen was so mad that the Cardinals signed him, and now we're like, well, if you want him back,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
you know, um, so yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting to see for me. The Cardinals have been pretty adamant about not having a 6-man rotation for long, forever. Um, but now they're talking about having one down the stretch because, you're going to have Matt's coming back. You're going to have um, Lynn coming back. They don't want to move Palante. I mean, I still think they've got too many arms, right? Somebody's going to have to shift to the bullpen no matter. But and I feel like maybe that's Lance Lynn. Um, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Because it feels like there's a lot. All of a sudden, there's a lot. And again, they're not nothing special. There's a whole lot of mediocre arms, but all of a sudden, it looks like they're going to have like this abundance of starter arms.
No, yeah, agreed. And it kind of pushes out anybody that they think may make that move. But I that's what kind of why I was asking, because I felt like they may trade from the rotation if they could. I don't know who they can though. And that's why I was
Yeah,
just trying to think of creative ways that they can improve and bring somebody in.
yeah. I mean, again, you're talking about any of those guys. You're having to eat a lot of salary, and when there's fairly tight against that first threshold, and I know Goldschmidt goes. Um, but Sonny Gray's contract goes up like 10, and um, there's a lot of different ways. Now, again, we know after last offseason, they approach payroll differently than we think they should, right? Because then I think their argument was that Sonny Gray's contract didn't get counted as 10 million; it got counted as an average cost. So there's that, but. Maybe that $10 million raise doesn't matter as much in their calculations because they've already factored it in. But I don't know. I just it's hard for me to imagine them with what they've got. And I think they've just kind of worked themselves into this corner.
Yes.
They're going to have to let some of these contracts work out because I just can't imagine them getting a whole lot of activity on the free agent market because of where they stand, with the current payroll.
Sure. No, and that that kind of rallies back to what we were talking about. They're middling right now in just about everything. Kind of back themselves into it. I don't know. And I think the interesting offseason is going to be just how they're going to be able to figure this out. And I think there's a lot of anxiety that they won't be able to. Um, and that's where things are in trouble, because there's a lot of the contract issues that you just mapped out for 10 minutes about the rotation that that goes throughout the team. And that's why the
Mhm.
idea of Alec Burleson and Mason Wynn and a potential Victor Scott and Jordan Walker, if that ever comes to fruition, could be extremely awesome. You could
Right.
be a lot of excitement or whatnot. But they've throw Teen Kents into that. If those things,
Mhm.
if that can happen, I'm willing to take what's going on right now. But the signs point to that's going to be going to be a painful growing spurt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that's what they're going to have to do, right? With the way that unless they change their philosophy about how they do things, they're going to have a lot of these young guys produce at all-star level, basically, while being paid league minimum.
Yes.
Um,
Well,
and that's what some of the best teams were with the Cardinals. They always got more value than they were putting into payroll for the most part.
yeah, no, and that's I would rather watch it next year and be a situation of crap, these growing pains are painful to watch, than to
Mhm.
sign a guy on the downhill slide and really struggle, as an
Yeah.
everyday bat
Yeah.
of something that basically what
Right.
they already have. Yeah, that's what I want to avoid next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, to some degree, it starts to be. It's funny, but Nolan Gorman, I think it's his first arbitration hearing this
Yeah,
year. I mean, these guys, are starting to get some of those guys are starting to get expensive or might get expensive. I mean, still not as much as a free agent, but relatively expensive. So you gotta strike while you
yeah,
can, or you start moving pieces. So yeah, I agree. I think that it is. I think it's probably impossible for the Cardinals to go into next season as the favorite to win the NL Central, which is something I don't think we've said in a long while. Because even this year, right? They signed the pitching staff, and we're like, okay, the division's weak, and I don't believe, Corbin Burns is gone from Milwaukee, and they're going to take a step back. And you know, Cardinals might not have been a favorite, but you could talk yourself into them winning the division. Um, and almost every year since 2000, they've been a favorite to win it, right? Even if they don't actually win it, if some teams rise and fall, um, but the Cardinals are always there. I don't think they're. I mean, barring the Dodgers trading Shohei Ohtani to the Cardinals, I don't think there's any way you can go into next season and then see, legitimate predictions of the Cardinals winning the division.
Yeah, I mean, you could just tell that you could tell that the Brewers right now are living a charmed life, because it would not surprise me at all if Brandon Woodruff comes back next year and you know, is just
Sure.
nails for
Yeah.
him. Things that the
Yeah.
Cardinals used to do, to take a gamble on an injured guy, come back, and him be a stud. I mean, it just wouldn't surprise me at all.
Mm-mm. No, I agree. I agree. It just, for 20, 25 years, the Cardinals were the team of the NL Central. I mean, like I said, you had a couple years where the Reds challenged you, then they'd fall off, and you'd have a couple years where the Cubs would challenge, and then they'd fall
Yeah.
off, and the Brewers and Houston, if you want to go back far enough, although Houston didn't fall off as much, they were pretty good challengers. But it was always that idea that whoever was coming up was battling with the Cardinals. And now, I don't know. I think maybe right now it is just the Brewers division, especially after they did so much this year. I mean, we'll see how they do, but going into next year, they're the favorite. And anybody that rises up from the other teams are challenging them, not challenging St. Louis. I mean, St. Louis is going to be the challenger for a while unless they can show that they can, put that dominance back together. And right now, it's a long way off.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a scary time. It's one of those to
Yeah,
where, and
yeah.
ultimately, I'll be surprised. I mean, I was much more fired up on this one than I expected to be, just because. I mean, to me, it's been like, hey, what are they supposed to do? You have two guys that are going to be knocking on the Hall of Fame door who just have not played well. They've not been good, to be honest
Right,
with you.
right.
And what are you supposed to do on that? You know what I mean? I mean, their hands are tied. I mean, it's just underperformance, and that's just, you're in a run of bad luck right now, and that's just one of those things. I mean, I told myself, I was like, enjoy it while you can. At least you have some of the young guys to look forward to, and enjoy the playoffs. Considering the Cardinals probably most likely aren't going to be in them. That's just what I told. That's the way that I've handled it. And but it's a scary time, because you can see this slipping off
Yeah,
really quickly, especially when you see you know everything that we've talked about, and we haven't brought this up yet, is the uncertainty on the television revenue, and that's
right,
gonna.
right,
I mean, if they're not going to be players in the market, if that's not cleared up soon.
right. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I agree, and I always keep checking on this Diamond Sports bankruptcy thing, which I think is kind of in limbo now. Um, but I don't know. I mean, there was some idea of them having a streaming thing, but I feel like it's probably. I know that they own their streaming rights, but for some reason, I want to guess that they can't stream them without blackout,
Yeah,
because of something in that
gosh,
Valley's contract. Because otherwise, I think they would
yeah.
have done it by now, right? You just supplement the Valleys with this. So I think there's got to be something that if Diamond Sports goes away, I expect probably by next year even they'd have a streaming option
I
available.
I want to say this, and I want to believe it, but I just don't know if I can. I wonder if some of the delays that are going on all these networks are maybe just the smaller legal details of MLB doing something right and getting this out to where everybody can watch every game. I'm not convinced that's the case, but I would like that
Yeah,
on
yeah.
a positive spin. I kind of wonder if that's some of it.
I think that MLB has definitely understood the blackout thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because the ones that they have control over, which are Arizona and San Diego, maybe Minnesota. I can't remember. But those teams can buy a package and they're not blacked out, right? They can stream it through MLB TV and they're not blacked out from any of their games. And baseball continues to talk about how they, we've heard Bill DeWitt III say you want to get it in front of the people, that blackouts don't make any sense. So, as these TV contracts in whatever form, I mean, if they go into bankruptcy or if they just serve their purpose and they live out the next 7 or 8 years, at some point in time, that streaming without blackouts is coming. MLB would like to see it sooner rather than later, but then again, that's going to be a correction in the league because that's not going to pay as much
Yeah.
as this RSN contracts do. I think the Cardinals are in good position, and we've talked about it before, just because you've got people all over, especially the central part of the United States and even farther, that will want to watch Cardinal games, right? That are the Cardinal fan base extends out for so far. That's why they can be such good attendance, is partly because they draw from
Yeah.
wherever. So, they're going to be, I think they're going to be in good position when this happens, but they've got to get to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's funny. You bring that up. I was listening to the Foul Territory podcast, and Katie Wu was on the other day, and after whenever she left, it was Brzezinski and Kratz and Braun were on there, and they were talking. They were like, they go, what kind of a market is it that people would kill for 30,000 paid attendance, and they're complaining about it? You know what I'm saying? If that tells you how wide it is, I mean that says it all.
Well, I think I've seen that the St. Louis metro area, just the St. Louis metro is like less than 3 million people. I mean, they draw more than the actual metro area is. And, part of that's because the metro area, they've got all the suburbs and stuff like that. But a lot of it is because people will come, Ray. People will come. But they, from here, right? I mean, there's people here that go up for a game or two or whatever. And to some degree, it's a destination, right? It doesn't necessarily matter how the team is doing. You're making your pilgrimage into St. Louis, but when the team's better, you're going to get more of those kind of people. So, they've always going to have a real good basis for this, but they don't know what that basis is, and they don't know how much that money is. How long does it take for people to adapt to it? There's a lot of uncertainty in the financial situation this way, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
So we will see. I continue to be hopeful that we will get that. But we will see. Cardinals have another couple games with the Twins. Sonny Gray gets to go back to another one of the teams that he's played for. And then they've got 4 with the Padres before heading to New York next week to play the Yankees. So when we record next week, we will be at the end of August, and here we go. This is it. It's hard to believe that this season has moved by so quickly that we're getting almost ready to turn the calendar into the final month.
Yes, without a doubt. This has flown by. It's when you look at it, you're thinking, man, this is, we're in fall before too long. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I'd like to think that the weather is reading the calendar.
Next week's going to be brutal.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Alan and I'll be back with you next week to talk about hopefully another good week of Cardinal baseball, and then maybe a little bit of playoff hope. We will have to see. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel.
Good night.
Hey everyone, Daniel here. Appreciate you listening to the show, and if you are a regular listener, great to have you. If you're a first timer, hope you come back. We would love it if you would rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. Either click some stars or give us a write-up. That would be awesome. It helps to get the show spread a little bit farther. And heck, we just like the feedback. I'm going to be honest with you. So if you haven't done that, please do. Give it a shot. You can find us anywhere you find podcasts for the most part. We're also on YouTube. If you're interested in, putting this on in the background, there's no video with it yet. Hopefully never will be. I don't think you want that, but who knows? You can find us, search for Meet Me at Musial, or you can look for Daniel Shoptaw under my personal account. But the shows upload there. So if you want to listen to it there, you can. Contact Alan or Daniel or me. That's me, Daniel. You can contact us at any time at C70 at AMedlock1. You can follow the Twitter account of the Musial at Meet Me at Musial. And thanks for being a listener. Appreciate it. And talk at you later.
Right now, their leading hitter all time against the Cardinals in postseason play at the plate. Beltran has murdered Cardinal pitching over the last 2 postseasons that he's played against them. Here tonight, he has doubled and scored. He's flied to left. He's grounded out, and he's walked. Bases loaded, 2 out. Cardinals up by 2 in the pitch. Fastball, Steve Wright ball. Carlos Beltran during the regular season had 41 home runs, had 116 runs batted in. He has 3 home runs in this series. He's at the plate with the bases loaded, 2 down, the pitch. Curveball, swinging a tap foul, and the Cardinals are 1 strike away from going to Detroit and the 2006 World Series. Adam Wainwright gets a new baseball. Rubs it up, stands on, looks in with the bases loaded, 2 out. Cardinals leading 3-1 here in the bottom of the 9th inning. One of the most dangerous hitters in the business at the plate, Carlos Beltran. He is ready, so is Wainwright. The 0-2 delivery. Curve struck him out looking. The Cardinals are going to Michigan to take on the Tigers. They mob Adam Wainwright on the mound. They are National League champions and headed for Detroit as they mob the pitcher. And now Yadier Molina, in comes the bullpenners to pile on. The Cardinals have won this game 3-1 on a 2-run home run by their catcher Yadier Molina, and they're still out on the infield celebrating. What a ball game this has been.